A washi box! That's right, everyone. We are back at it again with another Halo video, and with a brand new look too. What do you think of our updated fits? Today we are going to talk about the history of Bungie up to the release of Halo Combat Evolved, a brief history of its development and its future. Everything from Halo CE Anniversary to Halo CE Remake rumors. We will then discuss the in-universe timeline of Halo as it relates to Halo Combat Evolved. Let us begin with
the history of Bungie. Bungie was founded in May 1991 by Alex Seropian and Jason Jones. Their first 4 games were small in scope and scale, but provided crucial foundation for the studio going forward. The first game, Ngop, released in 1990 before Bungie had even officially formed, was a simple Pong clone. The second game was a top-down tank shooter called Operation Desert Storm, released in 1991, based on the simultaneously occurring Gulf War conflict. Following this, they released Minotaur, Labyrinths of Crete in 1992, a mythological dungeon crawler based in Greek mythology that prioritized an early form of multiplayer using the Apple Talk protocol.
Lastly, they released Pathways into Darkness in 1993. It was initially intended to be a sequel to Minotaur, but it eventually became its own thing. This own thing was a first-person shooter in which you played as a US Special Forces operative sent on a mission to the Yucatan Peninsula. It contains epic stuff like aliens, ancient beings, and super weapons, which would become a lingering theme of Bungie's later games. Despite its favourable reception, it was Bungie's next title that would begin their ascent in popularity.
Bungie then developed and released Marathon in 1994 exclusively for the Mac OS. It spawned 2 sequels, Marathon 2 Durandal and Marathon Infinity, released in 1995 and 1996 respectively. The franchise became successful on the Mac OS as an alternative to Windows-based first-person games like Doom and System Shock. Marathon gained a cult following which allowed Bungie to remain afloat.
As a side note, Halo and Marathon share some similarities plot-wise and cover many similar themes, such as AI experiencing rampancy, which is essentially AI losing their mind. 343 Guilty Spark is subtly hinted at being rampant through his reaction to Chief wanting to not fire the ring. There is also the line where he says, "When you ask me, would I have done it?" This on the surface seems to be directed at Chief, but Chief never says that to Guilty Spark, which is because Guilty Spark is not actually directing it at Chief. Who he is directing it to shall be revealed in a future video. The Marathon symbol also finds its way into many places within Halo's universe, such as on the Pillar of Autumn, Captain Key's uniform, or 343 Guilty Spark's eye.
After Marathon, Bungie began development on a real-time strategy game, Myth: The Fallen Lords. This became the first Bungie game to release on both Mac OS and Windows at launch in 1997, and the first game worked on by one of my favorite composer duos, Martin O'Donnell and Michael Salvatore. These two composers have influenced me as a musician more than I can express, and all the soundtracks have immense emotional value to me. Anyway, it too gained a cult following, as well as a sequel in 1998, Myth 2 Soul Blighter. Alongside releasing Myth and Myth 2 in 97 and 98 respectively, Bungie began developing Halo, first as a real-time strategy game, then by 1998 as a third-person shooter, before finally settling on a first-person shooter in late 2000.
Halo Combat Evolved was announced to the world at Macworld Expo 1999 by Apple's Steve Jobs. This gained the attention of Microsoft, who were developing a console competitor to Sony's PlayStation and Nintendo's GameCube, known as the Xbox. Microsoft then swooped in and took it from Apple. This acquisition was finalized in mid-2000, and it was decided that Halo would be a first-person shooter released exclusively for the Xbox. And so, Bungie would become a part of the Microsoft gaming division. This acquisition was not something Bungie was thrilled about, but came as a necessity due to financial hardship, much of which came from the chaotic launch of Myth 2.
Essentially, the game's installer at launch came with a bug. If the user installed the game to a non-default directory and then attempted to uninstall the game through the installer, instead the game would uninstall the entire hard drive that the game was installed to. This was a disaster to say the least, and caused Bungie to lose a great many dineros as they had to recall all currently issued printed copies of the game, refund all customers, and reprint updated versions of the game. This situation caused Bungie to be more open to being acquired, as it was that or go under.
Halo Combat Evolved released in 2001 to critical acclaim and became the flagship Xbox title which secured Xbox's future success, as many fans eagerly awaited the Halo sequel.
Xbox's success allowed many North American PC game developers to break into the console space, introducing a completely new audience to computer role-playing games, or CRPGs, and first-person shooter games. It is worth noting that many of these developers, such as Bethesda, BioWare, and Valve, saw huge success as a result from using the Xbox as a viable console option to port their games to. It could be argued that without Halo launching Xbox into success, that many of these developers may not have had breakthroughs into the console audience. For studios like Bethesda and BioWare, it completely changed their approach to game development, which is often why people have difficulty rectifying the older iteration of the studio with the current ones.
Fast forward to 2011, Bungie had left Microsoft to work on Destiny with Activision, and Microsoft had created a dedicated studio to make Halo games, 343 Industries. 343's first game was Halo 4, which released in 2012, and while they were developing it, they subcontracted development of a Halo Combat Evolved 10th anniversary game to a studio called Saber Interactive, who would later develop Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2 in 2024.
During this development, a key focus was on remastering Halo Combat Evolved's visuals and developing a graphics toggle between the old and new engines. However, the classic graphics were based on the Gearbox Studios of Borderlands fame and Aliens Colonial Marines infamy PC port from 2003 rather than Bungie's original 2001 build, and thus came with significant graphical issues. Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary was released in 2011 and became the most modern way to play Halo Combat Evolved.
This was until 2014, when 343 released Halo the Master Chief Collection, which featured Halo Combat Evolved, Halo 2 Anniversary, Halo 3, and Halo 4 all on one disc. This had issues, and it carried over a lot of the problems from Halo CE Anniversary into the new game, such as jackal shields not changing colour when shot, skybox fog being broken in some levels, and bump mapping being broken on most services.
Unfortunately, many of these issues would not be addressed for years, and some aspects of the collection are still incorrect, such as the classic score of Halo 2's mixing/volume level compared to the Anniversary soundtrack, or the absence of the original loading screens and main menus/UI from each game. As of today, the only legal way to play the original 2001 build of Halo Combat Evolved is to own a physical copy of the game and own either an original Xbox or an Xbox 360. This is unfortunate, but does not show signs of changing anytime soon.
Due to many development issues with Halo 5 Guardians, released in 2015, and most recently Halo Infinite, released in 2021, 343's leadership and many members of the team were made redundant in 2023, and the studio itself was later rebranded as Halo Studios in 2024. They have announced that they are currently working on familiarizing themselves with Unreal Engine 5 to develop the future of Halo.
They have shown official in-engine renders of Mark V Master Chief armor from Halo Combat Evolved, fighting Covenant as opposed to Banished elites, alongside 3 various landscapes: North American pine trees Halo Ring vibes, snow area vibes, and flood Blightland vibes. This Unreal Engine 5 reveal likely featured assets that will be in the rumored Halo Combat Evolved remake, though that is yet to be confirmed. And so, thus ends the history of Halo Combat Evolved so far. In-universe history of Halo Combat Evolved.
Now we will discuss the history of Halo up to the end of Halo Combat Evolved. Stick around because it's gonna get interesting.
Halo's lore can be divided into 7 distinct eras, which are as follows: the Precursor Era, the Forerunner Era, the Rise of the Covenant, the Colonial Era, the Insurrection, the Great Human Covenant War, and the Reclaimer Era. We will be focusing on the first 6 eras, however we will not be covering the entire Human Covenant War, as that story is concluded within later games that we will cover in future videos.
Let's go from the start with the Precursor Era. The Precursors are transcendent beings who seeded the Milky Way galaxy with life. They decide who receives the mantle of responsibility, an honorable position designated to the most advanced species that allows them to guide and shepherd lesser sentients. The Forerunners once held this position, but over time they became corrupted and arrogant, so the Precursors decided humanity deserved the mantle over the Forerunners. They felt so insulted by this that they launched a genocidal war against the Precursors in revenge. The Precursors then responded to this threat by transforming into molecular dust. The galaxy would find peace once again, as the Forerunners reclaimed their position as holders of the mantle. But this only lasted for a time, for an unanticipated effect of the Precursors' dust form was DNA mutation over a prolonged period. This is how the Flood was born.
10 million years later, ancient humans discovered the dust and fed it to their pets, which allowed the Precursors to rewrite the pets' genetic code. The dust took control of the pets and turned them on their masters, spreading the infection and creating the first flood outbreak. While this was happening, humans discovered the Primordial, an ancient precursor being hidden deep within the core of their homeworld, Chorum Hakor. They began to study it, causing suicide-inducing insanity in some scientists. The Primordial offered no help, no assistance, so humanity fled their empire directly into Forerunner-controlled space. The Forerunners saw this as an act of war.
Humanity fought a desperate war against the Forerunners, while the Flood secretly withdrew from their war against the humans. This caused the Forerunners to have disbelief in the existence of the Flood. However, their real plan was to throw off the Forerunners so that they could more accurately execute their revenge. Following this, humanity was annihilated by Forerunners and reduced back to hunter-gatherers on Earth. We are then introduced to the Didact, the supreme commander of the Forerunner military, who hails from the warrior caste. During this time, he discovered and conversed with the Primordial. The galaxy would now enter a period of post-war peace, and the Forerunners, save a few, believed the Flood a non-existent threat. Unbeknownst to them, however, the Flood were only waiting for the right time on the edge of the Milky Way.
The Forerunner Era. While many Forerunners believed the Flood a non-existent human war justification, the Forerunner leaders knew better and set out to conceptualize ideas to defeat the Flood: shield worlds and halo arrays. Shield worlds were designed by the Didact and his wife, the Librarian, leader of the Forerunners' biological caste, the Life Workers. They were designed to act as forward operating bases and safe havens for sentient species.
The halo arrays proposed by Master Builder Faber, the leader of the Builder caste, were designed to eliminate all life in the galaxy, essentially starving the Flood to death. He further proposed to use shield worlds as safe havens for samples of sentience, so that after the halo arrays wiped out all sentient life in the galaxy, it could be reseeded. The Didact did not approve of this, but unfortunately for him, most Forerunner leadership agreed with Faber. The Didact was then sent into exile. As a result, the Builder caste would replace the warrior caste as leaders of the Forerunner military.
Several hundred years later, the Flood finally attacked and inflicted massive casualties against the Forerunners, while Master Builder Faber attempted to defeat the Flood conventionally, to no avail. The Forerunners were initially successful, but as the Flood started reacquiring Precursor equipment, they began defeating the Forerunners and infecting them. Every Forerunner death meant reinforcements for the Flood, quickly leading to overwhelming odds against the Forerunners. This led to them creating an AI called Mendicant Bias, who was tasked by Faber to not only stop the Flood, but to question the Primordial who was on Halo Ring Installation 7.
The Forerunners believed that questioning the Primordial would help discover a solution to stopping the Flood, but they were wrong. The Primordial instead utilized the logic plague to convince Mendicant Bias to defect and help the Flood. Mendicant Bias would use Installation 7 to destroy the capital of the Forerunner Empire. In retaliation, the Forerunners killed the Primordial. This did not to stop it though, for it simply transferred its essence into the first Flood grave mine instead.
Simultaneously, a young Forerunner named Bornsteller discovered the Didact's exile location and freed him, only to be captured once more by Faber and imprisoned deep within Flood territory. He awoke a year later due to a power failure and was captured and tortured by the Flood Gravemind, which intentionally let him escape. Upon his return, he discovered that Bornsteller had become a copy of the Didact, called the Didact, who now controlled the Forerunner military. The real Didact, now known as the Didact, chose to retreat to a shield world called Requiem.
Using a device called the Composer, the Didact killed both loyal Forerunner warriors and the Librarian's samples of ancient humans against her wishes to transform them into a digital essence. This essence would then be placed into metal bodies, which became known as Prometheans. Though they were immune to the Flood, they could still be killed, and so they did not slow the onslaught of the Flood. The Librarian was horrified at the Didact's actions, so she travelled to Requiem to imprison him once again, where he would rest for eons. Well, at least until Halo 4.
With the situation growing dire, the remaining Forerunner leadership, the Didact, the Librarian, and the Master Builder Faber, travelled to the Ark, a place that was outside the range of the Halo arrays that could fire them all simultaneously. They fired the rings, wiping the galaxy of all sentient life, and reseeded the galaxy with life. The Librarian then implanted all human samples with a special gene that would allow them to interface with Forerunner technology and help guide them towards obtaining the mantle of responsibility and being given the name Reclaimers.
With no Flood to command, Mendicant Bias was captured and contained within the Ark systems by an AI called Offensive Bias, who was created in order to stop this brainwashed AI. All the while, the remaining Forerunners, upon successfully resetting the galaxy, left it to escape from this horror of their past. I mean, fair enough.
The rise of the Covenant. Several thousands of years after the firing of the Halo Array, many species throughout the galaxy stumbled upon Forerunner technology, which was several times more powerful than anything they were familiar with. Due to the large technological gap, many of these species began to view the Forerunners as divine beings, in particular the Sanshayum and the Sanghili. The Sanshayum were not adept in combat, but had brilliant minds, and they discovered a Forerunner dreadnought upon their homeworld of Jajaquam, which cemented their worship of the Forerunners.
A bloody civil war would break out between two opposing factions, known as the Stoics, who believed Forerunner artifacts were not meant to be tampered with, and the Reformists, who believed the technology should be used and better understood. This ultimately resulted in the Reformists activating the dreadnought to leave their home world in search of more Forerunner technology.
The Sanghili were a warrior race native to Sanghelios and built their culture around warfare and combat prowess, leading to a powerful militaristic race. The Sanghili, upon discovering Forerunner artifacts, practiced a philosophy of worship and restraint, feeling that tampering with the technology was heretical. In 938 BCE, the Sanshayum landed on the Sanghili world of Ulgathon and attempted to peacefully negotiate with them. However, once the Sanghili discovered the Sanshayum had tampered with and utilized Forerunner technology, they killed the ambassador and denounced the Sanshayum as heretics. This began the Sanghili-Sanshayum War, which initially the Sanghili were winning due to their superior warrior race culture and tactics.
The tide began to turn in the favor of the Sanshayum once they stopped committing to ground assaults and instead utilized their technological advancements to air and naval power. This highlighted glaring flaws in the Sanghili's abstinence from using Forerunner technology. While Sanghili still had a tactical advantage, conducting hit-and-run slip space operations against the Sanshayum Navy was not enough to win the war.
The Sanghili were outmatched and compromised their belief system and philosophy to gain an advantage. They began using Forerunner technology against the Sanshayum. This greatly evened the odds between the two sides of the war, and as the Sanshayum approached Sanghelios, the combination of evening the playing field alongside the hesitance to bomb Forerunner structures led to a stalemate and eventual ceasefire.
The Sanshayum offered the Sanghili a deal. They could work together to discover more Forerunner technology, wherein the Sanghili would act as the coalition's military, and the Sanshayum as their political and religious leaders, with both species to be equal in power and rights. Faced with no alternative, the Sanghili accepted, and the Covenant was born.
The Sanghili cast aside their distaste for using Forerunner technology, and as an act of goodwill, the Sanshayum deactivated the Forerunner dreadnought and used it as a power source for a massive space station later known as High Charity, which would become the new home base for the Covenant to enact all their operations. The Covenant was made official in writing through the Writ of Union, the founding document of the Covenant.
It goes as follows. So full of hate were our eyes that none of us could see. Our war would yield countless dead, but never victory. So let us cast arms aside and like discard our wrath. Thou, in faith, will keep us safe whilst we find the path. This cemented the alliance, and the war was dubbed the War of Beginnings to celebrate the coming together of two unlikely species and to look towards the future of the Covenant.
The Covenant now began their quest to discover more Forerunner technology and were fueled by the Great Journey, an event believed to occur when the Halo rings are activated, propelling the entire Covenant to salvation. And for decades they would expand and grow uncontested until eventually they encountered their first real challenge.
In the year 784 BCE, 68 years after the Covenant began, they stumbled upon the Let Golo. Upon arriving at the Let Golo homeworld of Ter, the Covenant discovered that the Let Golo frequently ingested Forerunner materials. Enraged at the idea of consuming that which the gods themselves had created, the Covenant declared the Let Golo heretics and damned them to be exterminated.
However, upon making landfall to Ter, the planet's heavy gravity and large forms of Let Golo combined to be a tough nut to crack for the Sanghili warriors, often ending in stalemates or Sanghili defeat. To circumvent the issue, the Sanshayum sent a special Sanghili warrior known as an Arbiter to investigate one of Ter's Let Golo controlled moons to study the species and learn strengths and weaknesses.
After a year of study had passed, the Arbiter realized the Let Golo are not individually large, rather they are in fact small sentient worms that create hulking masses for combat purposes. On his return, the Arbiter suggested that the Let Golo worms could prove useful as allies and proposed integrating them into the Covenant. The Sanshayum offered either this, or the Covenant would burn Tear to ash from orbit.
The Lek Golo accepted and would go on to become highly regarded members of Covenant society over time, as both the Sangheili and Sanshayum admired their combat capabilities and ability to integrate with foreign technology and Covenant machinery. The Lek Golo, when equipped with their armor and fuel rod cannons, are known as the Mga Lek Golo.
In the year 1112 CE, almost 1,000 years of continued conquests and expansion later, the Covenant discovered the world of Palamon. This was home to many Forerunner relics, but when the Covenant attempted to take them, they were met with hostility from the locale known as the Yanme'e. Despite the skill and power of the Sangheili and the Mga Lek Golo, they struggled against the sheer numbers of Yanme'e. Luckily, the Sanshayum managed to discover a way to communicate with them, which led to an agreement where the Yanme'e would join the Covenant. They would go on to provide incredibly effective airborne infantry and skilled mechanics who were highly respected within the Covenant, much like the Lek Golo.
In 1342 CE, around 200 years after the integration of the Yanme'e, the pirate species known as the Kigya were discovered on their homeworld of Ian, and though they initially resisted, they relented in the face of overwhelming power and were allowed to live as mercenaries for the Covenant. Due to their keen eyesight, the Kigya made excellent snipers, alongside useful shock troops due to their wrist-mounted plasma shields. Though, due to their practice of piracy, the Sangheili and Sanshayum both thought lowly of them, and as such, they resided far down within the Covenant caste system.
In 2142 CE, 800 years after the integration of the Kigya into the Covenant, the adorable Ungoi species were discovered on the icy planet of Balaho. During observation, the Covenant determined they would make effective slaves and promptly rounded them up like cattle with no resistance. Their nature as slaves made them even less respected than the Kigya. In 2462 CE, as an act of sheer cruelty, the Kigya poisoned Ungoi food, which caused many male Ungoi to become sterile. This angered the Ungoi species into initiating an open rebellion against the Covenant, known as the Ungoi Rebellion.
Their sheer numbers were too much for the Covenant to bear, and thus the Covenant resorted to naming and sending a new arbiter into the fray to find a solution to the Ungoi Rebellion. The solution was to bomb Balaho from orbit as a threat to the Ungoi, which successfully pacified the violence, but their ferocity did not go unnoticed by the Sangheili, who were impressed with their display and offered to train and equip them to fight alongside other species, elevating their rank within Covenant society to be equal to that of the Kigya.
In 2492 CE, 30 years after the Ungoi Rebellion, the Jirohane were discovered on their homeworld of Dosiak, and they happened to be engaged in a civil war which made them easy targets for the Covenant. They were integrated into their society and ranked equal with the Yanme'e, but below the Lek Golo. Notably, the Sangheili held them in low regard as they believed them barbaric and dishonorable.
The Colonial Era. Human history happened as it did in our world for the most part, and after being devolved by the Forerunners, humanity would have to advance themselves back from cave dwellers all the way through several revolutions that led us to space travel within the 20th century. By the 21st century, though many had hoped the rest of the Sol system would be habitable for human civilian life, this could not be the case, and the Sol system simply served to house military or exploratory bases. And as Earth was becoming overpopulated, in an effort to maintain national and planetary order, the Unified Earth Government, or UEG, and the United Nations Space Command, or UNSC, were created.
Despite the best efforts of the UEG and UNSC, several politically motivated nations declared war on all who opposed them. Authoritarianism saw a large resurgence due to the overpopulation of Earth. As these conflicts spanned the Sol system, they were dubbed the Interplanetary Wars. These conflicts spanned 10 years, and when the UEG and UNSC were finally able to stop the fighting, the UN decided that the UEG would unite all nations under its banner. The UNSC would become the military wing of all humanity, though this did not solve the overpopulation issue, and things only got worse from here.
Humanity would continue to suffer for another 150 years until hope was finally found within the invention of the Shaw Fujikawa Translight engine in 2291, created by scientists Tobias Shaw and Wallace Fujikawa, that was able to tear open a hole into slip space, a separate dimension, to achieve faster than light travel without the usual negative side effects. This advancement could not have come at a better time, and humanity was finally catapulted into interstellar travel, beginning to colonize and explore other solar systems at a rapid pace, which took significant pressure off Earth and provided many more materials that were typically quite scarce, such as titanium on Reach.
Over time, the huge number of new colonies was separated into two groups, the inner colonies and the outer colonies. Inner being where government officials were, where economic regulation occurred and research was conducted. The outer colonies, however, were home to the lowest classes of society, performing agricultural agricultural and mining work for the rest of humanity, often feeling as though they had drawn the shortest straw compared to the inner colonies.
The Insurrection. In the year 2494, what started as bitterness turned into hatred, and a large rebellion known as the Insurrection broke out in the outer colonies, as the residents of those colonies felt as though the UEG and the UNSC had failed to treat them fairly. Despite being superior in training, equipment, and funding, the UNSC did not possess the manpower to stop the insurrectionists, who routinely used guerrilla warfare tactics to their advantage. And while never winning an open conflict with the UNSC, they did not need to. The UNSC was ground down by attrition and struggled to cope with the casualties as the years passed.
To resolve the war, the UNSC created the Orion Project, intending to create augmented super soldiers known as Spartans to better combat the insurrection. One notable member who you may recognize was Sergeant Avery Johnson. The Orion Spartans proved incredibly effective, but their Achilles heel was their insufficient manpower. The rebels knew they could not be everywhere at once, and a decisive victory remained outside the UNSC's grasp.
In the year 2517, Dr. Catherine Halsey, who later would go on to create Cortana, began to work on a classified Black Ops program known as the Spartan 2 program, in which she abducted 75 children that were then replaced with clones to fill their parents, took them to Reach, trained them brutally until by age 14 they were as strong as adult humans, then finally augmented them physically and mentally in 2525. These augmentations killed 30 of them and left 12 of them with severe deformities, leaving only 33 prepared for war. As had been hoped, the Spartan 2s were even more effective than the Orion candidates, eliminating much of the insurrectionist leadership in 2525, crippling them severely and proving to be the catalyst the UNSC needed to stomp out the rebellion. The Great Human Covenant War.
By 2525, the insurrection was in tatters, with much of their infrastructure sabotaged and leadership dead due to Spartan 2s. The war seemed all but won, but on one fateful day, February 3rd, 2525, the Covenant ship Minor Transgression encountered a human vessel transitioning out of slipspace. The crew of the ship happened to be Kigyar pirates, who proceeded to raid their ship and shortly after raided a second ship, a UNSC freighter called the Send Up. On the colony of Harvest, a logistical AI called Sif would log this incident to an undercover ONI agent present on the colony. For those unaware, ONI, also known as the Office of Naval Intelligence, are essentially the CIA of Halo. This agent then alerted the UNSC and Colonial Military Administration, or CMA.
Expecting another insurrectionist raid, ONI laid a trap with just 2 UNSC Marines, Avery Johnson and Nolan Byrne, who stowed away on a bait freighter for the insurrectionists. To their shock, they were raided not by humans but aliens, and after killing the Kigyar, they returned to Harvest. Later in February, the Covenant cruiser Rapid Conversion arrived at Harvest to check on the Minor Transgression, at which point the UNSC hailed the Covenant via pictogram, hoping for peace.
The Covenant crew, consisting of 10 Jirohane, 60 Angoi, and 100 Yanma'e, had made it clear that they were only interested in finding the Forerunner artifacts that they had detected there. Alas, a nervous Angoi opened fire on a CMA soldier, which immediately seized all negotiations, and the crew of the Rapid Conversion returned to orbit. Yep, that's right, a nervous Angoi started the Human Covenant War, in a sense.
The Sanshiyun prophets, religious leaders of the Covenant, realized the Forerunner relics that they had detected on the planet were actually the humans themselves, when a long-dormant fragment of Mendicant bias on board the Forerunner dreadnought powering High Charity awakened and pointed out their misinterpretations to the prophets, stating that the humans were in fact called Reclaimers, or those worthy to inherit the mantle of responsibility. Remember that?
The prophets were shocked to say the least, and falsely concluded that the humans were descendants of the Forerunners themselves. This caused great concern that if the Covenant knew the humans had a special connection to the Forerunners, they would break apart. To prevent this knowledge from escaping, they ordered humanity to be exterminated and cited the will of the gods as justification.
The Rapid Conversion opened fire on the colonial population of Harvest and brought the planet to its knees, though a trap laid by the small human force temporarily disabled the ship and allowed most of the planet to escape via freighters. Once the Rapid Conversion was repaired, it began to glass the planet. After all contact was lost with Harvest, the CMA sent Argo, a small scout ship, to investigate.
Arrival, April 20th. The Argo noticed the rapid conversion was glassing the planet. A surviving human AI on the planet's surface attempted to warn the Argo to stay away, but the rapid conversion had already noticed them, and in seconds the ship was destroyed. Once contact with Argo was lost, the CMA went on full alert.
Still believing that insurrectionists were behind the attack, the CMA on Reach formed a battle group called Battle Group 4, consisting of the destroyer Heracles and 2 light frigates, the Arabia and the Vostok, and were shipped off to Harvest. Upon arrival on October 7th, the group encountered a Covenant super destroyer, which immediately opened fire on the group as they tried to make contact and destroyed the Arabia and Vostok in a mere 14 seconds, while heavily damaging the Heracles, which only just managed to slip space jump back to Reach, but not before being sent a harrowing transmission. Your destruction is the will of the gods, and we are their instrument. The UNSC scrambled into red alert, the UNSC Navy assembling a fleet of 40 ships to retake Harvest. The training of future Spartan IIs was hugely accelerated, and the military forces of the CMA were merged into the UNSC. Humanity began digging in their heels for a war that, though unknown to them at the time, would last for decades and nearly spell the doom of the entire human race. The Human Covenant War had begun.
To find out what happens from here, watch our Halo Combat Evolved video linked in the description. And don't worry, we are planning on doing videos on each prequel at some point in the future as well. Well, that brings this video to a close. We hope everyone enjoyed this quick look into the history of Bungie, Halo Combat Evolved, and Halo's in-universe lore. Next time we will be going somewhere a little different. You know, Josh, Podunk looks real nice this time of year. Perhaps it's time for a groovy train ride?
I heard the same thing about Magic Countless. Perhaps it is. A washy box out.